the time of year when the leaves change, the foliage starts to fall off the trees. We went to the holiday after holiday, into the winter, when it's cold. So this morning I'm going to preach on, or talk to you, tell you a message about being an autumn and winter Christian. There was a little boy who lived far out in the country in the late 1800s and reached the age of 12 and never in all his life seen a circus. You can imagine his excitement one day. A poster went up to school announcing that the next Saturday a traveling circus was coming to the nearby town. Now, this boy was pretty excited about this. So he ran home with glad news and the question, Daddy, can I go? Although the family was kind of poor and didn't have much money. But he said, I'll see to it that you have the money to go. So come Saturday morning, the chores are done and the little boy stood by the breakfast table, dressed in his Sunday best. His father reached down his pocket of his overalls and pulled out a dollar bill, and that's probably the most money that a boy ever had in his life. The father cautioned him to be careful and then sent him on his way to town. The boy was so excited, his feet hardly seemed to touch the ground all the way. As he neared the outskirts of the village, he noticed people lining the streets, and he worked his way through the crowd until he could see what was happening. Lo and behold, it was an approaching spectacle of a circus parade. The parade was the grandest thing that this lad had ever seen. It was caged with snarled animals. As they passed, bands beat their rhythms and sounded shining horns. Midgets performed acrobats while flags and ribbons swirled overhead. Finally, after everything had passed, where he was standing, the traditional circus clown with floppy shoes, baggy pants, and brightly painted face brought up the rear. As the clown passed by, the little boy reached into his pocket and took out that precious dollar bill. Handing the money to the clown, the boy turned around and went home. What had happened? The boy thought he had seen the circus when he had only seen the parade. Are you experiencing all that God has for you? The Christian life is a marvelous adventure, an exciting journey that is meant to last an entire lifetime. Yet, many Christians seem to be content to float in a sea of mediocrity, settling for second best. Or like the boy we just mentioned, they contentedly quit after the parade. They assume that it is all there is to the Christian life. They either forget about the circus or they just decide that they've seen or done enough. How about you? Do you want the abundant life that Jesus promised? It is important for us to look at God's example in nature and recognize that there are likewise 4 seasons of our life. In Minnesota, they say they have 2 seasons, winter and construction. We laugh at that, but too often we live our Christian lives with a similar mindset. We focus on just 1 or 2 seasons of our lives, and we neglect the rest of them. Too often we live active and fruitful spring and summer seasons and then act like that's it. We never really adjust to or accept autumn and or winter. Instead, we thrive during these seasons. We sometimes prefer to spend our time proverbially locking ourselves indoors and wistfully remember the spring and summer that no longer exist. And a lot of times the messages or sermons given seem to be most geared toward those in the summer season of their life, the adults with young families. Today is primarily for our older saints who are in the autumn or winter of their lives. And for those of you who still look forward to a long remaining summer, it is a time to reflect on our goals and expectations for our autumn and winter when it comes. You see, God has created and put us on this earth that our entire lives be fruitful and bring Him glory. We are not just hired to serve for the specified career and then retire. The proposition is, within the span of our lives, God has appointed us many seasons. A right time for everything and a purpose for every time. The way of discipleship, love, and worship of God is to accept His schedule and plans for our whole lives and to order them accordingly. In that He has ordered our lives from the cradle to the grave, and along each step of this journey, there are certain needs to be met, tasks fulfilled, problems faced, and ministries to be served. Excuse me. Autumn and winter. Autumn. 50 to 55 plus, approaching empty nest and retirement. No longer have to be the backbone and driving force in society. The next generation is beginning to take over, make the decisions, pay the taxes, and so forth. Raising your young children is being replaced with grandchildren, and all you have to do with them is to enjoy them. And then there's winter. In the winter of your life, you can literally feel it in your bones. Nothing feels and reacts the same anymore. Everything has changed. Increasingly facing reality is the last stage of the journey, soon to be gone, some peacefully and some tragically and painfully. Sir Winston Churchill described this time as a surly advance of decrepitude. I remember when I first moved from out in the country, and my mom sent me over to the neighbors to get eggs. And I went over to Sam's grandparents, Mr. Yater. And as I was standing out there talking to Mr. Yater, and he was working in the shop there, and I was just curious as a young guy, and I said, Mr. Yater, how old are you? And he told me, and then he kind of looked at me and he grinned, and he said, well, at first I said, well, geez, I didn't think he was that old. And he grinned and looked at me and he said, Dick, he said, don't ever worry about getting old because there's a lot of people denied that privilege. I've never forgotten that. And not too long ago, a Harvard professor conducted a study on attitudes of aging in Africa. He found 100-year tribal men who were actively swimming in cold waters, riding horses, and extremely active in their community. In this culture, aging did not mean deteriorating or even slowing down. The mindset was that the older a person, the more they grow in wisdom, respect, ability, value, and even glamour. In fact, it was found that this positive attitude about aging seemed to produce healthy physiological effects on the cellular makeup of their bodies. Yet, in our culture, we collectively perceive aging as bad. We see it as becoming less useful, able, or purposeful. Unfortunately, too many of us have bought into this concept. And I'm not talking about the younger folks who don't appreciate their elders. Even worse is the vast majority of elders who have bought into it. There is a tremendous and sad trend in this country that no matter how good a person's health or how sharp their mind, Americans tend to quit life when they retire. Current statistics show that there is an alarming correlation between when a person retires and how young they die. Doctors and scientists attribute this to the fact that when people retire from their careers, they tend to retire from most physical and mental activity, period. Here's a perspective. God equips us for all our seasons. In the first half of life, ambition, energy, health, opportunity to establish career, family, build a home, raise children, make ourselves financially secure. In the second half, experience, perspective, time-tested values and truths, flexibility in time like never before, and so on. And then there's the two great challenges. Temptation to live in the past, temptation to live in the future.